Hello, I am Paula Bennett and welcome to my New Zealand Herald podcast, Ask Me Anything. One thing I've learnt in life is it's never too late to learn something new. So on this podcast, I talk to people from all walks of life to hear about how they got to where they are and get some advice and guidance on some of life's biggest questions. Well, there's nothing like the big question of how we deal with grief and resilience, and I am absolutely privileged to have Dr. Lucy Hone. Lucy is a leader in the field of resilient psychology, an adjunct senior fellow at the University of Canterbury, and internationally sought after as a speaker. Lucy knows firsthand the impact of dealing with devastating loss. Back in 2014, her 12-year-old daughter Abby was killed in a car crash alongside her best friend Ella and Ella's mum Sally. Over the past few months, I've been dealing with a bit of my own grief with losing my father, who was late in life, but you still feel it. It's one of the hardest things we have to deal with in life, but something that we all go through at different times. And so I'm so glad to have Dr. Lucy Hone here to help us all through it. Lucy, welcome, and thank you for joining me today.
Oh, thank you so much, Paula, and it's a delight to be here with all of you, all your listeners.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, my housekeeping rules are really easy. The podcast is Ask Me Anything, so I can ask you anything, but you don't have to answer. And then the second is, which is absolutely, we just do the safe space.
Yeah, so I can go pass.
Yeah, you can get pass. No, and that's absolutely fine. Okay, should we do some quick fire? Have you got a favourite movie or book of all time?
Favourite book would be right now, if you ask me that, probably Still Life. And I can't remember who it was written by because I'm a Kindle reader. And so you never really see the front cover, which means that you become terrible about authors, which as an author is even more of a deadly sin, isn't it?
But it's true, isn't it? I'm but the same. And you sort of think, I can't quite remember.
If you haven't read it, it's such a beautiful book.
Oh, really? I haven't.
They travel, an unlikely posse travel from the East End of London, from a pub where they hang out, to Florence and spend a year there in a life-changing moment, set in post-war, and it features a parrot, and it's just it's a beautiful lyrical novel.
Okay, well, you've sold me. You've absolutely sold me. Okay, if you can invite anyone to a dinner party, who I think will do it live or dead?
Would be probably Rufus Henry, who is my nephew, who is 26 and has Down syndrome. And he gives the best after-dinner speeches of any human alive. And he is one hell of a party machine. So anyone who hasn't yet had the privilege of meeting him would enjoy that.
Oh, I love that. I love that. And, I mean, you look fantastic. So how do you, I know you've done the coast to coast and we will talk a bit about that, but do you have that regular exercise routine? And you look like you look after yourself very well, says she who doesn't do much.
Oh, I have a complete love-hate relationship with exercise. The reason I set myself hideous goals like the coast to coast is that I hate exercise so much. And actually, we were signed up to do the coast to coast in 2022, the year that COVID, made it not happen. My husband and I were both doing it, and we laughed because literally the day that notification came in, I think was a Sunday, and Monday morning we lay in bed and went, I can't be bothered. Can you? No, I can't be bothered. So, I make myself. I studied exercise psychology as part of my master's, and that is all about how do we get more people more active more often. So having that information in my head definitely helps. So I have done this morning 8 minutes of strength training in my hotel room because something's better than nothing.
Yeah, wow. So let's leap right in now. And so the first half is we're going to get to know you a little bit better and some of your experiences. And then I'm really, really keen to spend some time on that advice because, as I say, if you're living, you've probably had to deal with grieving and death at some stage. And if you haven't, you probably will. But let's stick with the psychology. So what got you interested in psychology? What did you have to do to become a psychologist? And what are your specialist areas?
So that is a great question to start with because I'm not a psychologist. And not many people know this about me. So I studied my master's in applied positive psychology. And as part of that, we took a deep dive into resilience psychology. And that is the bit that's always fascinated me. So I got onto that program because I had a degree. But on that program at the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia, there were 40 of us from all walks of life. So there were lawyers who wanted to change the legal profession so that it actually enabled people to have a bit of work-life balance, for instance. There were doctors, health professionals, there were lots of education people. So that was my switch, because my undergrad was in history at the University of Edinburgh, where I studied American secret intelligence and Russian literature.
Wow, okay. Okay, that could be a rabbit hole.
Basically then went on to do my PhD in public health, and that is what I am. So it makes more sense if you think of it like that all of what I do, I describe myself as a pracademic, because my job is to be across all of the best of evidence. So I look at all the research papers, and then I think, what's useful for people in their everyday lives here? And then I'm science communicator, in that I go out and communicate it. And because I've always been a writer most of my life, and now I do a lot of speaking, I guess the communication bit is my strength. And so I'm good at kind of translating the complexity of the research findings, dragging them out of the ivory towers of academia and bringing them to people in their everyday lives in ways that they can actually do them. Yeah. Because there's not enough of that. So my PhD was literally looking at this body of work of resilience psychology and wellbeing science and saying, why is it not getting through to the masses? Why is it not being adopted in schools? Why is it not adopted in public health?
And as you say, there's all of that evidence, and there's the Dunedin study, and it showed that not necessarily background, it's the kids with the resilience.
And the connections. I mean, literally, the relationships is one of the highest predictors. You know, people who are tethered to others do better throughout the lifespan.
Yeah, really interesting. Tell us about Abby. We'd love to hear about her.
So, in truth, I was thinking about, Abby died in 2014, and we've just had her anniversary again recently, the anniversary of her dying. And it really made me think, I'm quite distant from Abby now. So she died 9 years ago. She was 12 at the time. You know, we're reaching the dangerous moment of the horrible moment of she'll have been dead for as long as she was alive. So in truth, I have memories of her, of course, lots of beautiful, happy memories of her. But they do feel quite stuck now. They feel, you know, in that they're just so limited, whereas our boys I'm living a current life with them, so it's just so different. Yeah. So 12-year-old Abby, I guess that's what I'm saying, is all I can talk about, obviously, is 12-year-old Abby, who was just a bubbly, vivacious, beautiful, blonde, blue-eyed, annoying, jumpy, uppy, downy little girl, you know. And like all of our memories of 2014, they're quite distant, to be truthful. Yeah. We keep her alive in our world, but I realise, thinking about it lately, that I do feel quite removed from her.
Now, and there's nothing that can compare with hearing about such a major, major tragedy. I mean, you lost 3 people that day. And just how you get through that next 24 hours, that next 48 hours. I lost a brother suddenly and a best friend just a few weeks later in separate accidents. And, you know, I do remember...
How old were
being told. I was 22, I want to say. Yeah, so I had a degree of maturity, I suppose. But I can still, as you say, the memories do fade a bit. Yeah. Although I had a wonderful dream the other night, and I could smell my best friend.
Wow.
I know. And I don't, obviously that's not real. But I woke up feeling jealous. Really good.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Going, wow.
Because I don't think I've lost my mother, my brother, and our Abby, and I don't really think I can hear or picture any of them particularly. Well, and I've just accepted that that's life for me.
32 years ago.
That's really cool.
And I could. So, I mean, obviously that's my own whole imagination and dream playing tricks on me. But I woke up feeling really good about it.
Yeah, it's good to have those connections, isn't it?
Yeah. And I suppose I'm doing the naughty thing and leaping straight to advice. But, you know, with that...
Do we need to go back?
No, with that, really, we can always go back. But, you know, with that initial shock, I mean, it is just kind of breathe, isn't it? I mean, all you can do is breathe.
Yeah, it is, in truth, a moment that is unthinkable. And what happened for us was we got a call. We were staying down at Lake Orho at the lodge, and we got a call saying that a policeman was on his way to see us. And I remember my husband looking at me and saying, "They don't come to bring you good news, do they?" And we had heard that there had been an accident, which is what we thought was delaying our friends. So Abby had hopped in the car with Ella and Sally, and they were very delayed. So I mean, really the stuff I remember from that moment is being like a wild animal, really sweaty, caged animal, thirsty, standing up, sitting down, pacing. You know, it's, your most raw moments of life.
Your brain and body can't really comprehend it.
No, and actually it's something that I've learned through my research since, is that in that, for people like me and yourself, when you were talking about your friend, I'm not sure about your brother, but these are traumatic accidents. So you're dealing not just with grief, but you're also dealing with trauma. And they're different processes. So you're dealing with the shock of the trauma. And kind of luckily for me, I'd done an awful lot of resilience work in that post-quake period in Christchurch. And so I had learned more about dealing with trauma and post-traumatic recovery. So I went to see a counsellor for a couple of sessions, and she said to me, "You're dealing with trauma as well as grief." And that was such an aha moment for me, because I thought, oh, okay, yeah, I get it. You know, I don't know much about grief, but I do know about trauma. So the fact that I startle easily, that I'm hyper-vigilant, for instance, is to do with the trauma, and it will fade in time. So it was just I'm all about knowledge is power. You know, the more I know, the more I understand, the more empowered and better equipped I feel to navigate whatever it is that we're going through.
And that's why you do so much of the work that you do, isn't it? It's why you've written your book, Resilient Grieving, which I highly recommend. It's why you do a lot of, I've been fortunate enough to hear you speak at a conference that I was at, and I know that some of our staff went to something with you more recently, and they all just came back, just talking about you and what you've done. But what you've done with that loss is actually leap right in, more than most of us do.
Yeah, but this is because I'm a communicator at heart. So going right back, I'm a Londoner, I'm born and bred, and my first ever job was as a journalist. And so the first piece I ever published was for Harper's and Queen on the perils of paranoid parenting, the dangers of mollycoddling your children. And get this, I was 23 and I definitely didn't have children.
Yeah.
But I did hear Frank Ferrudi, who was a sociologist, speak at the time, and it really had an impact on me. And so I can trace back all of my work since I was a 23-year-old has always been about how can we get the best from our lives, come what may, and given the circumstances that we are and the environments we're in. So really, I wrote for years I used to interview people I did an interview with a black belt grandma at one point, and then I also interviewed just so many different people about how they'd kind of overcome challenges that when I look back on my life, it's obvious that enabling resilience and well-being at that mass market level that's what drives me. How can we equip people so that we can't medicate an entire generation, and not everyone can afford counselling? So what do we do? What are the ways of thinking and acting and being that enable everybody to find their own kind of recipes for looking after themselves? And that has been my passion always.
Let's touch briefly on part of your own well-being, and then let's come back and really talk about how we can help with our own resilience and working our way through grief. So, I talked about the coast to coast that you did with your husband, Trevor. Yeah, is that part of your well-being? Sort of pushing yourself a bit further, taking yourself, I would imagine, outside of your comfort zone on that one.
I have this. Yes, I think it is. So when I did the coast to coast this February, about 10 days before, I just loathed myself. I was truly properly scared, because what most people like me don't know about the coast to coast is that, yes, you can bike and run. So you can do the training for that, and you can somehow drag yourself over that mountain pass. And I was never aiming to, really, compete in it. It was all about completion for me. So I was running and walking that, it was never a major thing. But what most people, dummies like me, don't know is that the kayak is the thing. It's terrifying. You cannot train yourself very easily to learn that river, because the river changes all the time. And you spend 6 hours in a whitewater kayak going down very remote places that aren't easy to access, so you can't even go there very often and train in them. So I nearly pulled out because I was just terrified. But then when I look back on it, I don't know. I truly don't understand, because I understand quite a lot about psychology, but what it is about me. But I love a big, hairy, audacious goal, and that's why I went and studied in America and did my master's there. I mean, it was partly because it was the only place in the world that you could study resilience psychology in 2009. But I'm long on hope, I think.
I quite like that. I reckon I worked out one of my characteristics, which is that I like being underestimated.
Oh, because you like to prove them wrong.
Yeah.
You're in for a good fight. Yeah.
So it really that really inspires me and makes me work harder and set that goal, and I can kind of ignore it and get on. And I certainly did it in my political career. Yeah. And I remember a couple of years in or something, and it was probably with John Key, and I sort of said to him, I said they all underestimate me, and he looked at me and he goes, yeah, and you love it.
So
you play to it. And I went, I thought about it, and I thought, actually, I think he's right. Yeah. Okay, when we come back, we're going to talk more about Lucy's book and hear about her journey through the grief of losing Abby, and get, I think, that most importantly, that advice and from all of that evidence base that Lucy's talked about, so that we can all try and be more resilient and live a hopeful life. Lucy, there's a quote at the start of your book, and it is, "We've got to live, no matter how many skies have fallen." And that's just sort of so true. And we have to live through grief because we are alive. So can you talk me through a bit of your own experience, and then how it's got you to a place where you can give other people advice and help?
Yeah, I have learnt so much about grief, and initially was a very personal crusade to find my own way through grief, has become a crusade to change the whole way we approach grief, because I've really bumped into the fact that our traditional kind of existing grief support and resources are pretty wanting. So when the girls died, I was quite far towards the end of my PhD. So I'd done an awful lot of research, and I was publishing in all those peer-reviewed journals, being a proper academic back then. And so I was immediately told to write off 5 years of our life to Abby's loss, and that we were now prime candidates for divorce, mental illness, and family estrangement.
And you've got boys as well.
Beautiful boys.
Yeah, you've got, and so
who were very much alive, standing in the kitchen in front of me. And I just remember thinking, no way, not on my watch. And I write this in the book, that I had this voice, and I can still picture and remember this now, standing by the oven in our kitchen thinking, choose life, not death. Don't lose what you have to what you've lost. And so this is my training kicking in. And what that post-losing the girls period taught me was that the existing grief advice was very pathologizing, meaning it was like, this is what all the terrible things that are going to happen to you. And they really hadn't discovered all of the incredible research that I had spent the last 5 years looking at. So I thought, oh, this is interesting. Actually, I kind of think I want to be my own experiment here and see what, if any, is useful from all of the research, the resilient psychology that I'm so well versed in. You know, which of these ways of thinking and acting can I apply to myself now? And will they help? Because, Paula, parental bereavement is known to be considered to be the worst form of bereavement. And so, and I actually really did tick all those boxes of Abby was 12, which meant I was, you know, we were her primary caregivers. She was very much living at home. So that makes it mean that the risks of you really struggling are even more elevated. But I just became determined to just be my own experiment. So I started writing a blog that was called One Wild and Precious Life, which came from the poem that Sally had given me only weeks previously. And when I started writing the blog, then that's when I started talking to Alan and Unwin about writing this book, Resilient Grieving. This is back in 2015. And so I finished my PhD and I spent 2 months writing this book, which I honestly do think is probably the best piece of writing I'll ever do, because I couldn't have written that book at 19, 29, 39. You know, it was the culmination of all of the research and living that I'd done and life experiences. And by then I'm a professional researcher, so I can research things fast, I can write fast. And so I absolutely immersed myself in this process. And what emerged was that there are so many tools and strategies, ways of thinking and acting that come from resilient psychology that can help people find their own path through grief. And what really struck me is that most people only know about the 5 stages of grief.
Yeah.
And do you know that there's no empirical evidence to support them at all?
No, but I haven't taken much notice of them.
And so what's interesting is, A, they're not scientific. No. B, we also what you are told is that grief is as individual as your fingerprint. So if it's as individual as your fingerprint, how can we all go through 5 stages? Yet they're still being taught in tertiary institutions across the world today. And what I'm really quite cross about them now is that they are actually proving hurtful and harmful for the bereaved, because the bereaved end up feeling that they're not grieving right, using, punctuation marks, if they're not going through the 5 stages.
Or if you haven't gone through a stage, does that mean I'm not moving on? And actually there's something wrong with me that's bigger than just dealing?
And most counsellors are still using them too. And so I've just published a chapter in the International Journal of Positive Health, I think it was called, with other clinical psychologists from Australia and Canada, and particularly the Canadian clinical psychologist Bridget said to me, honestly, I have seen it time and time again in my practice that years ago I used to say to people about the 5 stages of grief, and it would literally deflate them. It would depress them. And so, because being told what's going to happen to you is actually just not very helpful. A, it's not what's going to happen to you, but B, it's like it makes you a passive passenger on this grief journey. And what all of my work has shown in the last 8 years that I've been focusing on coping with loss is that many people want to be active in their journey through grief. They want to be active participants, involved in and deciding and learning what helps them and what harms them as they travel through their grief journey.
Absolutely. So, and let's talk about, you talk about rituals and what helped you, and I found that really interesting. So can you talk to us a little bit more about, what were some of your rituals and why you think they helped you and might help others?
So I guess all of my work is about what helped me, but also always looking at all of the science as well. So there's now amazing, very robust empirical evidence to show that people who are bereaved, who find ways to connect with those that they have lost, generally adapt to the loss better. So this is absolutely kind of how I work. It kind of worked for me. And then I'm like, oh, I wonder if there's research about that. So I then go and look at the research. So I've been looking in Death Studies International, which is the peer-reviewed journal. Doesn't that sound miserable? And so there is really, robust evidence showing that if we find these connections, then it helps us grieve. So when we're talking about rituals, it's important for people to understand we're not sort of talking about things like the funeral, those sort of big,
Sure.
We're talking about small, very personal ways and practices that you can bring into your life that enable you to keep that person alive and present in your world, even though they're physically not there. So in the book, I talk about the fact, I still do this now, that I often gather foliage as I'm out on a walk with the dogs in the afternoon, just snap a few branches off and bring them home and put them in a vase, because it was something that Sally always did. So it's my way of connecting with her. I often bake my mum's beautiful almond cake because that's a way of connecting with her. And just recently, I had my brother's two beautiful sons, 22 and 26, I think they are, come and visit us this summer. And my brother was a yachtsman and he died tragically early of dementia. And these two beautiful boys said to me, because Dad was a man of the sea, whenever we swim, so we're out swimming, I'm swimming with these boys, we're out at Taylor's Mistake, they said you have to take a gulp of seawater for Dad. And I just thought, I just love it. And, we run a Coping with Loss community, a group on Facebook, where I often ask people things like this, what are your rituals to connect you to your lost loved ones? And so I have heard of an awful lot of fantastic, beautiful rituals. And I just thought, I love it. So it illustrates how personal they are.
Yeah.
And so then they have to be real connective tissue. They're the things that connect you and just reassure you that you don't have to move on without bringing that person with you.
I mean, I'm obviously walking a path with my mother at the moment with her grief. And they'd been married 61 years. So, learning how to live alone and to sort of not have that connection has been really... But she's got some wonderful little rituals that she's just kind of, I sort of popped around yesterday or something and I said, oh, you're sitting in Dad's chair. And she said, I make sure I'm half an hour in his chair every day.
So that's beautiful.
And that's my time to sit and think and love.
And we call what you're describing with your mother is going through, that grief is about relearning to live in the world without that person here. And because, it took us a long time to live with them and learn all of their habits, of course, it takes a long time to relearn to live in a world without them here.
Yeah. And you talk about hope a lot and, we've got to live and you choose life. So that can be quite difficult for people anyway. I know people that have just actually lived decades and the grief dominates. And I understand that. And then, I watched my own parents who went through, the death of their son, my brother, but they at some level, they chose life. With his memory.
And it is a choice. Actually, Tom Attig, who is one of the earlier researchers in bereavement, once said to me, I interviewed him for a podcast, and he said to me, there's a difference between your grief reaction, which is just all of those visceral things that you feel in the immediate, and you can't control those. And then there is your grief response, which is how you choose to respond to what has happened to you. And there is so much choice in that. And you have to choose life. And hope is such a powerful force. It's such a tiny little word. And in the book, Resilient Grieving, I talk about the fact that one of our professors in the University of Pennsylvania was a professor called Chris Feutner, and he was the pediatric oncologist at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. And he came to talk to us about hope. And I remember thinking, seriously, what hope can there be in your job? And he told us about when he has to give parents, that awful diagnosis that their child is going to die. He then spends time with them. And eventually in that conversation, he arrives at a point where he says to them, given all hope feels lost, what are you hoping for now? And this unearths the fact that we don't just have one singular hope in life. And so what are you hoping for now? And I remember thinking after Abby died, what am I hoping for now? And I am hoping that I can keep our family together, that we will go on and live happy, engaged, meaningful lives together. And so it sort of switches your true north, you know, from the kind of, I used to picture goalposts. I'm a good old adopted Kiwi, so rugby goalposts in my head, and think, oh, my goalposts have completely moved, you know, they've switched and gone to a different direction. So now what am I hoping for? I'm hoping I will keep my family together, which gives you this kind of pull factor, you know, a kind of guiding true north of, shall I do that? If I decide to do that, will that be good? You know, will that serve that goal of keeping my family together? Yeah. And just this weekend, I'm meant to be going tramping in Arthur's Pass. And because the rugby's on, our middle boy is flying down from Auckland to watch that game. So I just cancelled my tramping with a big group, because I know that that's what is my, you know, most important. And that is what Abby taught us, I think.
With yourself and I suppose I'm interested in your sons as well, was there ever a time where you felt guilty for being happy in those earlier days?
I write a lot. In fact, I'm writing this week about guilt. Because so we run this coping with loss program where we have an online live grief course. And so this has been incredible for me, because the book Resilient Grieving is one-way traffic. Yeah, it's me telling people all the stuff that I've discovered. Whereas being on a live Zoom call with the bereaved from all over the world has just made me realise so much of what they live through. They've told us that they feel guilty because they're not grieving right. So they're not going through the 5 stages. They feel guilty because they're experiencing positive emotions. So you just said to me, do I ever feel guilty about being happy? I was trained by Barb Fredrickson, who is the #1 researcher on positive emotions in the world.
Wonderful.
So I was so lucky, because I knew, and I'd seen all the research that shows that even during grief, even in our darkest days of our lives, positive emotions, A, occur, and B, are really helpful for you as you navigate your dark times, because you can't grieve all the time. You need to, you know, grief, actually what we know about grief now is that we oscillate between approaching our grief and withdrawing from it and, you know, removing ourselves and recuperating.
Restoring a bit.
And one of those ways, it literally is called restoration. You know, it's one of the things that we do. That's where your positive emotions come in. So it's okay to laugh with a friend, or to, you know, go to a concert and find yourself, you know, jumping up and down for a minute. And then you catch yourself and think, should I be doing this? Well, the answer is yes, you should, because your positive emotions are just as important as your negative emotions. And when you're going through grief, of course, you experience so many negative emotions. So you have, and they're much more like Velcro, you know, negative emotions are sticky.
Yeah.
They hang around. We love them, we cling to them, we ruminate. Whereas positive emotions, the science shows that they're really fleeting. So you have to work hard to find them, to grab them, and to kind of punctuate your life with them, you know, so the worst thing you can do is actually go out there and intentionally quash them. So don't quash them, let them be, let them breathe, and know that they're really helping you as you navigate your grief.
I'd like to give some advice to people who either are very close to someone that's lost someone or actually not that close. So I remember watching people cross the street so that they didn't have to talk to me because they didn't know what to say, right? Like, there's no way it was cruel or, you know, like it was just really they didn't know what to do. And neither did I, quite frankly. I was 22 years old and I didn't know what to do. And then I was talking to someone, and as I got to know them, I discovered that they'd lost a child under the age of 5. And I said to her, I said, you know, there's just nothing worse. And I said, I just don't quite know what to say. And she said, ask me about him.
Yeah.
I'd love to tell you what he was like as a little boy, you know?
So
and
good.
I thought, oh, I can do that.
Yeah,
you know,
so
I'm
good.
Genuinely interested.
And thank you for bringing that up, because actually that is something that not enough people know about the bereaved, is that we want to talk about those that we love. And I did say love, not loved, because of course we still love them. So there are lots of different ways you can support the bereaved. And I've just recently done a post about this, because you're so right, Paula. It's the thing that audiences and businesses ask me most. You know, I do a lot of work with HR professionals, and they're always saying, how do we support the bereaved? How do we enable them to come back to work? And so I think it's important to understand that there are lots of different ways you can support them. So sure, you can do the emotional support, the old, shoulder to cry on. 2, they also need physical support. I don't know about you, but I remember when my mum died in 2000, that some days, we had very little children, I used to go and just turn up to my husband's building site and say to him, can I just stand close to you, please? And the kids would be, sort of rolling around on the floor on the building site, but I couldn't stay away because I needed his physical presence. And one of our clients on our online grief course recently said that that her best friend had lost their partner. So she'd gone round for the first 3 nights and slept in the bed with her best friend. Yeah. She said, we did it as young girls, so why wouldn't we do it now? Yeah. So that's the physical bit. Yeah, you need the practical support, take them a meal, drive them somewhere, that kind of thing. And then there is the lesser known types of support. So what you said, the memory support. Talk to them. Share your memories, your opinions about them, your photos of them, any little stories you have, because we all want to keep their memory alive. Yeah, lovely. Then intellectual support. So go to the lawyer with them, help them talk to the realtor about how they're going to sell the house. So often people have to move when they're lost. Yeah, and it is practical, but actually there's also a real kind of intellectual, informational support here that some people can supply. And then just know that ongoing support is the real the key thing, that they don't want it for a week, they don't need it for 2 weeks, they need it to go on and on. Yeah. And I remember that 2 years after my mum died, one of my dear friends saying to me, how are you feeling today? And me, in that, the way she kind of emphasised today was a hint to me that she meant about your mum still. Yeah. And that is something that I know from our work that our clients tell us is they feel very judged by people, that they need to move on quickly. That, certainly within 6 months, you need to put that behind you and be moving on. Yeah. And so lots of my work is about reassuring the bereaved that that's not true.
And I suppose, Lucy, there's another side to it as well, which is I was in Wellington having lunch and bumped into a woman that I knew but I wasn't super close to. Said, how are you? And she said, I'm good. And she said, my husband actually passed away about 4 weeks ago. And I went, oh, I'm so... And she goes, not today. Today's the day I'm not.
Awesome.
And I went, cool. Yeah. So what are you having for lunch?
Yeah. So one of the things that from psychology is that we have these thinking traps that we commonly fall into. And one of those thinking traps, we all do this, is we expect people to be mind readers. So one of the things I'm always saying to people is don't expect people to be mind readers. Tell them what you need. Yeah. And she did that beautifully.
She did.
She just went, no, not today, thanks.
Yep. Yep. Today's the day I'm giving myself.
And I like the fact she said today, because it means tomorrow might be completely different, which is what grief's about, isn't it? It is such a maelstrom. We fluctuate, we ebb and flow. So we need different things on different days.
Yeah. Okay. So if we had the kind of 3 top things that we would give advice to people who are going through the grieving process, and could be at any point in there, that could be weeks ago, it could be 2 years ago, and I'm still don't quite feel like I'm working my way through. Yeah. What would you kind of say?
Okay, so number 1 is there are no 5 stages of grief. You need to put that out of your head. There are no rules, and basically find what works for you. Okay, so that's number 1. Yeah. Number 2 is that positive emotions, positive experience, good stuff still occurs throughout the grieving process. Don't feel guilty about it and don't quash it, because those moments are there for good reason and will give you respite. And the third is that grief isn't just an emotional process. It's a cognitive, it does our head in. You get brain fog. And it's a physical process. It affects your relationships. It affects many people kind of spiritually with their whole belief systems. So understand that it affects so many different spheres of your life, which means it's just downright exhausting. So lower the bar and really show yourself a bit of self-compassion. Take yourself off to bed. Do leave the party, Go home from the office, tuck yourself away, whatever you need to do. But that is, the overarching thing is find what works for you.
Yeah. There's just so much, and we could talk for hours, I know. But we're going to start wrapping up. So it's only fair that you get to ask me something, because it is Ask Me Anything.
Thank you.
So you may ask me something.
Well, obviously what I want to know is what has grief, your experiences of grief, particularly with your father recently, taught you, and how have they changed your approach to life?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm one that loves the memories. I suppose if I went back to 1991 when I lost, both my brother and my best friend, that really knocked me, obviously, for sixer. But I got to the end of that year and I realised that I was not grieving myself at all, and that, in fact, my role was to look after her parents and to look after my own. And in many respects, that's right. But for a 22-year-old, I just felt such a weight of responsibility. I mean, I literally had these two mothers ringing me every morning, at 7 a.m.
Wow.
And to find out exactly what I'm doing that day, because they were kind of living their lives through me.
Yeah.
And I got to the end of that year and completely melted down. And just realised that, and kind of found myself standing on a cliff and screaming and kind of going, I'm so sorry you lost a son. I'm so sorry you lost a daughter. But actually, I lost two, and then feeling guilty for that because, I had a role. So I suppose...
So how do you live differently because they died?
I did decide I had to live a bigger life. Yeah. So that was definitely it. So... of course, it feels completely unfair. And then it's like, well, okay, I'm 22. They were off doing what they wanted to do. I need to take more control. So I end up leaving my hometown, moving to Auckland and going to university. And I wouldn't have done that if they hadn't. Well, you can't say what I would have done. But it certainly was a catalyst for me completely changing.
And I think it's really beautiful to think of it like that when we lose people, their legacy to us is how do we live differently. And it sounds like you.
Yeah.
And what about your father? What is your father's legacy to you? What did he teach you?
It's been quite a different grieving with my dad, in that he lived a big life. He was 87, and I sort of explained it the other day, and I don't know if it's right or wrong, but for me, I don't grieve for him because he didn't want to live like that. Yeah. I feel like I'm grieving for
There is no right or wrong, remember?
That's right. I'm grieving for me and Mum.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
But I'm more asking you about what did he... Tell me about him, but what did he teach you?
He was opinionated and strong and believed in me and challenged me on a daily basis. And they were obviously things that I loved. Yeah. By crikey, we spent 8 years arguing, from about the age of 12 to about the age of 20. Yeah. And so strong-minded. And so he was really, I call him my resilience builder because he was a hard man in those early years. But I loved also watching him change. So he actually got more culturally aware. He turned into a bit of a feminist, which he certainly wasn't in the first sort of 25 or 30 years of my life. And so I actually watched him evolve, and it was something I was quite proud of because, he could be quite that stick in the mud and quite that, Lovely. So it's good.
Yeah.
Hey, thank you so much. And I mean it. Thank you for your honesty, your openness, sharing your story, using your own experiences, and I think mostly your intellect, which is how you can help others. And I find it really, really inspiring. Lucy's book is called Resilient Grieving, and it's in the bookstores now, and it is a revised edition. So go and have a bit of a look at that. It's well worth looking at. There's a great list of resources at the back of the book. Lucy, again, thank you so much for your time today. You have been listening to another edition of Ask Me Anything. If you've enjoyed this episode, make sure you follow me on iHeartRadio or wherever you get your podcasts. There are plenty of back episodes full of advice on all areas of life. Check out Lucy. You can find the book. We can find you, I imagine, via social media, can we?
Yes, as Dr. Lucy Hone on all social media channels. And our website is copingwithloss.co.
Fantastic. And Hone is Hone if you're looking for that. And you can get in touch with me by emailing askpaula@nzherald.co.nz. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and you can read my weekly column in the Herald on Sunday. I'm Paula Bennett. Ask me anything. Goodbye.